Hello, and welcome to the Southern Gulf Islands Heritage Recordings. My name is Chris Wakaluk, and I'm proud to present Volume 1 in this series with Harry Brackett. The purpose of these recordings is to provide historical and personal recordings of longtime Southern Gulf Islands residents, so their stories may be preserved for future generations to hear. This recording took place over 2 separate recording sessions in June of 2019 at Harry's home near Port Browning on North Pender Island. The voice of the interviewer, myself, has been extracted from this, and the audio has been edited to allow for maximum clarity and continuity in the storytelling. This project has been made possible by funding from Ptarmigan Arts. Thank you to Ptarmigan Arts for helping to support this project. And now I present to you Volume 1 of the Southern Gulf Islands Heritage Recordings.
My name is George Henry Brackett, and I was born in October the 11th, 1929, at Ganges on Salt Spring Island. And I moved to Pender when I was 7 days old. My parents and my grandparents lived here. The Brackett part of the family is Grandpa was Alex Brackett, Grandma was Margaret Brackett. He was a stonemason, and he worked in Victoria when they had to move here because their house got burnt out in Westminster, and they moved here in the 1890s and built their home in Browning Harbour. And as I say, they had their family here. Dad was 4 years old when he came, and he lived here until he was 90. And then we put him in a home, and that's the Brackett and the barman. My mother was a barman, and she moved here when I think she was 16 in 1914. And then her and Dad got married, and 2 years later, 1918 they were married. Or 17, I guess, because my sister was born they had 7 more kids altogether. There was, between the oldest and the youngest, I think was 12 or 13 years. And they've all passed away now except myself. So anyways, we're doing this to let people know what happened on the island. Wasn't anything exciting because it was just nothing here really to get you excited. When we were kids, we had a good time. We had to make our own fun. Well, we had to work too. We had a big vegetable garden. We had to weed the garden and water the garden. We had troughs. We made troughs out of cedar poles, hauled them out. We had 3 acres of garden, and we watered all this garden with these troughs. We had a well, or not a well, but a spring, which ran year round with lots of water. So and that was a plus for this island here because there's not that much water, well water, deep well water. So anyways, we had the spring, and it was a really plus thing to have. My grandpa and grandma had 160 acres. Well, I guess it was part of Browning Harbour. And Dad had 40 acres of that, and it was part of that. And some of the acreage went right to the water, so we were a kilometer away from the water, I guess. Anyways, this spring we had lots of water. But we didn't have any indoor plumbing. We had to go out to the pit toilet, or we didn't have any sink till a brother, he went to Salt Spring, and he worked for my uncle in plumbing. So when he came home, he put in a sink and a grease trap and a rock pit. So we had at least a sink. We could pour water down and get rid of the water. Dad had built this log cabin, or it was actually a house because there was 3 bedrooms and kitchen and a living room. And he built this whole thing for $300. And we had hardwood floors. At least the living room had hardwood floors and quite a few windows. And he made his own doors. Yeah, that was in 1929, and this house is still standing, still going. There was 5 of us slept in one bedroom. The 2 girls, they had their own bedroom, and Mom and Dad had their bedroom. And my brother, oldest brother, he built a cabin, and he lived in the cabin. or slept in the cabin. I don't say lived there, no. We were quite comfortable, and it was quite a ways from the road. We had, I guess it was 400 yards or so from the main road. So we didn't have car or anything else until brother came back from Salt Spring, and he had a bread wagon, Jennyville, to call it, and we had that car, but we had to leave it up by the road, which was quite a walk to get there. Nobody stole it anyways. Wasn't enough people here to worry about stealing a vehicle. So anyways, and once Dad drove it. He didn't even have a license. He had a license. He had a bread wagon in Victoria that used to deliver bread. That was when he was a teenager. He had a license then, but he didn't have a license during the war when he was driving this old van. Anyways, we were going down this hill by the New to You, which was actually the school at that time, and the front wheel came off, and it went down the road ahead of us. So Dad had to slow right down, and finally one side of the front car went down onto the road, but he got it stopped in time before it wrecked the car. Anyway, didn't do any damage to the car. So we had to jack it up and put this wheel back on and find the nuts. And I think we found only 3 of them. And then we continued on our way down to Hope Bay. Hope Bay had the store, general store, and it's where the CPR came in. It was called the Princess Mary, the CPR Princess Mary. And I guess they come in Saturdays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays, I think it was. And yeah, we always used to go to the store. In the summertime, they'd bring in ice cream. I don't know, a vat of ice cream or whatever it was they had. A couple of gallons, I guess, or 3 gallons or something. By the time the Princess Mary left, all the ice cream was gone already. Because everybody was standing there waiting for their ice cream cone, which was 5 cents a cone. We enjoyed the ice cream. And I guess we just went to meet the boat because that was the thing to do. Because they met a lot of people and talked to people, and I think there was maybe 3 or 4 cars on the island at that time, which was always there. Roy Adams, he had a delivery truck. There was a box and that. So we always tried to get up to the road before he got by, so he would give us a ride to the store. Otherwise, it was a couple of miles to walk. Anyways, it was something to do. We had a big garden. We had about 3 acres of garden. It was on a sort of a slope. And as I was saying before, we used to water it through these troughs and that. Once the garden planted and the weeds started to come up, we had every night after school, we had to weed garden. We planted all kind of vegetables, corn, beans, peas, squash, tomatoes, all kind of root vegetables. And we canned lots of them, like 100 quarts of beans and 100 quarts of peas and 100 quarts of corn. It had lots of fruit. It had strawberries and raspberries and loganberries and some currants. Strawberries, we used to sell strawberries to the store, and we used to sell them in, well, I think they still have the same kind of boxes that we had then, but 12 boxes to a crate. When we were doing this, that was during school, so we had to carry these dozen boxes of strawberries down to the store, which was another half a mile down from the school. We had to leave early before school so we could get these strawberries down there and back to school in time. We had 2 cases of them, and me and my brother each had one, so we had to take it easy. We didn't wreck these boxes of strawberries. Our clothes, we had to get them through the mail from Eaton store. I presume it was in Vancouver. We'd get clothes in the fall and clothes in the spring. We'd get a pair of boots We had no boots in the fall and runners in the spring. And if the runners wore out before we got our boots, well, then we went barefoot. We didn't get any new runners. When we were kids, we didn't have any doctors or dentists. We had a couple of retired nurses, which helped a lot. There was a doctor on Main Island, and a doctor, well, on Salt Spring, and other than that, it was Resthaven and North Saanich. So if you got hurt, you had to go by launch. Our school that we went to was where the New to You is now. Well, of course, we had to walk because there wasn't any other way of transportation. And, there was 2 rooms in the school. One up from 1 to grade 8 and from 8 to 10. 1 through 10 was on the roadside and the other one was on the bush side. I don't know how many kids were going to school when I first went, but I think maybe say around about 30. Then during the war, they just about closed the school down because there was only 17 of us going to school then. Yeah, I think every year we had a different teacher. For grade 8, I had Mrs. Grimmer, and I think she must have taught for another 15 years after that because they only had 1 room. There was not enough people to have 2 rooms going. And in the wintertime, we had to get wood for the stoves. They had a stove in each room. And Victor Menzies was a janitor, and he used to come and light it, and bring in the wood. They had wood in the basement, and he'd bring in the wood for upstairs, so we could be putting it in the stove when it got down. That was the heat we had for it anyways. And where the library is, there was a big cedar tree, and the branches were pretty low down, so all us kids used to climb this cedar tree and slide down the branches. And that was one thing we had fun with. And they also had bars and swings and rings and that. They were pretty close right by the tree, so everybody at recess and lunch hour went through a stage of playing in these trees. And then we'd play baseball. We had 1 baseball for the year, softball I should say, which got wore out within a month or so. So everybody brought string, and we had to tie it all up together, and that would last a day, and then we'd have to tie it up again. But pretty soon, the whole thing was all string. When it just didn't go anymore, we couldn't play baseball. So. And then we made a tennis court, and spent a long time on that. It was shale. So we had an old roller, and we rolled this all down and made this tennis court. I don't know where we got some netting to put across the middle there. That lasted for a while anyways. The tennis court was on the school property, just between the school and the church. In fact, I was over there. We went to the New to You the other day and parked there, and I was looking at this where this tennis court was, and it's still nice and flat there, and it was fun, and it gave us something to do. The subject I liked best was geography and math. Now, I don't know why that is, but I like the geography of thinking of, where other people live and what other people have done for a living, and think of people that lived way up north or lived in Africa or South America and what they done for a living or how they lived. And I thought that would be quite interesting. I like math. Or it wasn't math, it was arithmetic. We used to do quick work, and I loved that. That was fractions, but the other subjects wasn't very pleasant at all. I didn't like them. My best friend was Lou Auden, but he came in grade 4. We were 11, I think, because both him and I missed grade 1. I missed half the year of going to school, my first year, so I failed. And he failed his first year, so when he came, we were both in the same grade. And we were still friends. He just died a couple of years ago, 86 or 87, I think. And we were still friends up till then. So we were friends for 75 years. Now, that was my best friend on the island. Hope Bay store was started in 1905. R.S.W. Corbett and Sons. And I don't know how long R.S.W. Corbett lived. But anyways, Percy Corbett took over when his dad died. And Percy Corbett was, I guess he was still there in the 50s. And he had a general store. They had everything there. They had wash tubs and all kinds of groceries and hardware. And I know they had 22 shells. We used to do a lot of 22 practicing, shooting, and buckets and dry goods. The post office was in the store. That would be open every day. Every day the store was open. The gas station was there. They had one pump, and I guess it was regular. And then they had marine gas. His dad had a fish boat, and he used to get his gas there. And this was in around 42. Gas was 10 cents a gallon for a boat. Quite a few cents cheaper than gas for the road because they didn't have to pay the tax on it. And the gas used to come in by barge, and it'd be pumped up to the tank. Then he had coal oil and naphtha gas or white gas or whatever you want to call it for the gas. The boat used to come in 2 times a week, so in the summertime we'd try and get there every time the boat come in, just to talk to people and see what was going on, all the news of the day, and making sure you didn't miss anything. And feed day, I think, if it was once or twice a month, where the grain came in to feed the animals and that, the boat had to stay an extra time so they get all this feed unloaded. And the warehouse that all this feed was put into is where the cafe at Hope Bay is. That before it was burnt down, that's where the warehouse was. And that had all the feed, and I think he sold a bit of lumber, and any big items that he sold was in this feed shed. I think we called it the wharf shed. It was a pretty big building, but yeah. And I know it had scales in there. That's the only place we could weigh ourselves. I enjoyed fishing. We've done a lot of fishing, and we caught a lot, mostly coho at that time. And I guess we had to go to Tumba, which was probably about 14 miles. And Dad had a fish boat. It was a cod boat. It had live tanks, but it was slow. It only done 6 knots. So it took us a while to get out there. And we had to work the proper tides, so the fish were only biting on certain tides. And so we had to get them as quick as we could. And we got a wash tub full in not too long a time, say maybe an hour. The tide was right. We brought them home and we canned them in cork tins. We had a hand canner. We'd just do cork tins, but it would seal them, and then we have, say, 50 quarts. We had a 45-gallon drum that we filled with water and built the fire outside. Once it got boiling, it had to go for 4 hours, so somebody had to stoke the fire up because the fish had to be on the boil all the time. Otherwise, they wouldn't cook properly. And maybe 1 or 2 out of that 50 tins, the lid wouldn't pop in, so we had to eat those right away. So when they were fresh, so we done that a couple of times. We got our winter's supply of fish, and as I say, they were coho. But there's no coho here now. Well, there's not one, I guess, but fishing is certainly not like it used to be. And then we used to go in the rowboat out to the canal and through the canal and fish for grilse, which is a young salmon, well up to 14, 16 inches long. And we used to get a feed of those all right. And later on in years, we used to go out to Razor Point and get a couple of cod, bring them in and fillet them and have them for supper. So they were nice and fresh. I like fishing because I don't know. I just like pulling fish in, and because we fished ling cod for 3-4 years, you had to keep them alive. So when you took them to the sale, they had to be live. You had to take them out of the tanks, and for 10 cents a pound they were. But some of the cod weighed 30, 40 pounds, eh? The biggest one I think we got was 69 pounds. I think it was in the Pass, if I remember right. In Active Pass. Younger brother caught it. He was probably 8 or 9. He couldn't pull it in. He was too small. So Dad had to pull it in for him. A real pay dirt, that one. But that was the biggest one. Down where the museum is now, there's that island there. That Mother would take us over there for 3 weeks in the summertime, which would be supposed to be a holiday, but I guess it was. It was out on the island there, on the bluff side, and they'd throw our line over in the evening, and in the morning we'd pull up a rock cod. So we had cod for breakfast, and we could do that every day while we were there, which we enjoyed. Used to like to go fishing. That was fun. My first paying job was in the logging on Galliano Island. I was 16, and I was a whistle punk for the guys on the rigging, the chokermen, and that when they were out in the bush, and I was halfway between them and the donkey. So they'd holler to me, and I had a what they call a bug. I'd give the signals to the donkey, so he could go ahead or come back or tight line or whichever you had to be done with the log to get it into the spartery. Yeah, that was my first one. And then next job was I worked on South Pender with Alf Pednault, and he had a fish boat. And we used to go to, which is Post Cove now, which would have been government dock, CPR dock there, where the Princess Mary used to come in. They had a store there. We went from there to work in this old, they could call it a pickup, but it didn't have any box on it. It just had a flat deck. And went to work in that. I was still whistle punking then. That was a fun job, though. You could hear them chokermen, they'd be swearing and that to try and get this choker under the log, and language wouldn't be that great. And then when they got it into the donkey, I had to run down and unhook it, which is called a chaser. And that was fun, running back and forth and talking to the donkeyman. And I don't know if you know where the divide is, but it was people by the name of Brooks owned that property. Went to work in a boat, the same boat as we went to the dock at South Pender. We had to haul the logs into the spartery. The spartery was pretty well right on the beach. And then they had to get these logs in the water, so I had to put a stiff leg out, which is a, say, 200-foot tree or 150-foot tree. Put that out in the water and tie the end down and have a line on there with the it had a pulley on it, and then a cable attached to the donkey, which had to pull a log out and then come back, pull more logs out. So finally they got them all in the water. They had to have 2 operations to move these logs rather than just the one normally, where you just haul them in and put them on the truck. And that was at the divide. And then the other job, when we went into the dock there and went up in the truck, that was on the opposite side, but on the same property, halfway out the island, just at the end of the, it was Teese's farm at that time, but I think going on the road now, the far end of that, there's a road going up this way. Well, that was still part of Brooks, and we put in 2 settings there, which is spartery, 2 different sparteries. And my brother was a high rigger. He branched all the tree and took the top off and put up the guy lines. And we fell all the timber and bucked all the timber on Magic Lake itself. And as I was saying, there's two different parcels of land there. One was Adams and one was Allen's. And Adams was where the Magic Lake is now, and that's where we fell the timber and bucked the timber. There was out of the two parcels of land, there was 3 million feet of timber came off of there, mostly first growth trees. Actually, the whole island was logged. You wouldn't know it now, but if you look for the stumps, some of the stumps, I guess, are rotted out. But there was some big trees up to 5 feet, and not 6 feet. There was some big cedar, but there was no sale for cedar. We didn't fall the cedar. We fell the dead trees, all the snags, and that we had to fall those. And but there was a lot of big trees, say 4 feet, 3, 4, and 5 feet. And then on Saturna, and the biggest tree we fell was 8 feet through. That's including the bark. And first log was 24 feet long, and the chainsaw had a 6-foot bar, and we couldn't get through it even 24 feet up with the 6-foot bar. We had to notch it in and to get the headstock in, so we could buck it down for a log. Maybe every 100 feet there was a tree on the average. But they weren't thick like some trees up on the coast or on Vancouver Island. They're thick as you touch any tree, 2 trees at once or that. But not here. They were spaced out more so than that. Say 100 feet apart. They're sometimes more, sometimes less. Sometimes it was 2 or 3 right together. And those were pretty hard to fall. It was hard to get the saw in between them, but eventually managed to get them down anyways. Yeah, that was more fun than work, I guess. Just to hear these things crashing down. And well, it was hard work too, because the saw I carried, the bucking saw, was 69 pounds. And carrying that around all day was, and the falling saw was 125 pounds. So that was two-man saw. He had a headstock and a 6-foot bar. But it's certainly better than falling by hand and bucking by hand. It was very dangerous. When I worked in Galliano, for the year I worked there's 2 people got killed on the rigging. You had to watch what you were doing, and everybody helped everybody else out, eh? If they thought they were going to be in danger, somebody gave them a holler and saying that, better get out of there. When we was on Galliano, we raised a spar tree. You had to have a gin pole to put the cables on to winch the spar tree up. Anyways, they had it halfway up, and the top of the gin pole broke off, and it was, I would say 100-foot tree. And the whole top broke off and came right down over the donkey. And we thought, oh my goodness, the donkey punchers had the biscuit. But nope, come walking out of there just like he owned the joint. Yeah, it was a funny feeling that's for sure. Well, the road ended right where the baseball diamond is here. The house was there, and the barn was just a little further towards Bedwell that way. And in the mill, they had a mill there. Buck Swamp was just a swamp, because we used to go out there and hunt ducks. That was part of Allen's property, and there was a cabin down on Boat Nook. But that's the only 2 people that lived at that time between Wallace Point and Roe Lake. So there was a lot of area in there where there wasn't any homes at all. I don't know, when we were kids, we walked all over the place, but I think there were game trails, because we used to go out there hunting. Yeah, to get out to Magic Lake, called now, it was at the swamp. but it was at Bedwell Harbor Road, which is opposite the road going down to the marina. I guess it was about a 2-mile walk. Then the road stopped there, but it wasn't long before it was put right through to Bedwell Harbor, because there was 2 people bought places down there. I remember one name was Sproul. They lived by the beach there in Bedwell. I think 50 people went to the Second World War from Pender Island and South Pender. I had 3 brothers that went into the army in the Second World War. The oldest one, Ross, he joined up when the war first started, and he was working in the forestry before he went, so they put him in the forestry, and he worked in northern Scotland for most of the war. And the other 2 were working at a fish plant, and well, all the young guys were, but anybody who was working there got conscripted, so they had to go into the war. That was in 41 or 42. And then, of course, they started in Canada, and then they went to England for more training, and then they went to France. My brother Lloyd, he got wounded. He was only in France 10 days when he got wounded. His officer stepped on a mine. He was behind, and he lost an eye on it, and got full of shrapnel. He lived till he was 74, 75. And the shrapnel was still coming out of him. So he had that metal in him all his life. Yeah. But he sired 13 kids, so I guess he didn't hurt him. The fish plant used to hire like those people those age, but we were younger, and I was only 14, I guess, and my older brother was 16. We went to work over there just because they couldn't find anybody else, because everybody was in the army. And we walked over there from Short Road through Roe Lake and then into the fish plant at Shingle Bay. It was there, just out on the bank there. Worked 12 hours, walked home, and then went back, worked another 12 hours. And when we first started there, we unloaded fish, and like the packers would bring the fish in, and then they had a marine leg. It went down into the hole, and it was like buckets, on this marine leg. Because it kept going, you get these, just shovel it into the buckets, and we worked one time 36 hours straight by shoveling this fish, because the boat would come in. They the big catch of fish. The boat would come in. Well, they had to be unloaded, and there's 4 of us who were the only crews they had, so we had to stay there and unload all these fish. We worked 36 hours, and then they found a place for us to sleep there, and we slept for, I don't know, night or whatever. Then we had to load meal for 8 hours. And his meals were in 100-pound bags, And we had to get them on the dolly, throw them up on the dolly, and then throw them down on the boat. The boat crew looked after them there. They had a cooker, and they cooked them and then pressed the oil out of them, and then they used the oil. And then they used fish for meal, like for gardens, for fertilizer for gardens. And the oil, I don't know what they've done with that. They shipped that out. Well, they shipped all of it out, but I don't know where the oil went. And then the saltery, we worked at the saltery. It was at Otter Bay, where the marina is now. It took up quite a bit of room because they had some bunkhouses and another 2 or 3 houses where the managers stayed. And the wharves would probably hold, say, maybe 10 packers. The fish had come in in these packers, and they had to be unloaded into the tanks. They had, I guess, a dozen tanks, which would have been maybe 20 by 20, and they had to be put in there, and then the brine was put on them, and they had to stay there for, I think it was 2 weeks, and we had to shovel them out of there onto the platform. Then they were put in boxes. I think the boxes were 3 feet long and 2 feet wide and maybe 2 feet thick. And then they put more salt on them. All these boxes went to China, and they say that they wanted the salt more than they wanted the fish. So they put lots of salt in it anyways. Yeah, and then one year it was a cannery. They canned the herring, and that was just for 1 year, I think. So where the cans came out of the cooker, they had to be put in boxes, so that was one of our jobs, to put the cans in the boxes. The packer came in and loaded up. The packers' names were East Home, West Home, South Home, and North Home. And I think, if I remember, they were pretty close to 100 feet long. Well, it was like a little freighter, I suppose. Held a lot of cartons of fish. Yeah, that was about sultry. But it actually burnt down. But it wasn't working anyways. As soon as freezing came in, well, they froze the fish instead of canning them and that. But most of the fish were taken to the fish plant, which was what wasn't too far from the sultry, and they were made into fish meal. And the same process, they had to be unloaded. There they had a marine leg, which went down into the hole of the boat, and you shoveled the fish into the buckets, and they came up and threw into a hopper, and the hopper held a ton of fish. So every time you got a ton of fish, it had to be dumped, and it went into a conveyor and went into the I guess they were like a big box in the building. I think there was 6 or 7 of these, and they probably held 100 ton of fish each one. And then when they wanted to use them, they had this hopper going in between the 2 tanks on each side, and this hopper in the middle. Well, if the fish were fresh, one person could shovel these fish into the hopper as fast as they wanted them, and yet if they were a bit old, they'd get hard, and you had to really work to get them going. So there had to be 2 people in there for compensation's sake anyways, whether if it was easy going or tough going. So that was that, and they went into a cooker, and the meal came out one place and the oil came out the other. And the oil went to a tank. They had, I don't know how big a tank it was. It was a pretty big tank anyways. And the meal came out into a box or tank or whatever it was. And then it was taken out of there into sacks, 100-pound bags, and then stored. And when the packer came in, they had to be all put in the packer. And that was hard work, because those things weighed 100 pounds. And they had to be put on this trolley and up, maybe say stacked 5, 6, 7, 8 high. And then the same putting them into the packer. They had a chute. We had to lift them off the trolley and put them on a chute. And somebody had to be down there to pack them into the packer. So that was what happened at the fish plant. Well, during the Depression, I guess, in the 30s, we mostly lived for meat on venison, because there was lots of venison, and they used to come into the garden, erect the garden, so Dad would have the shotgun and out through the window with the pit lamp, and bang, there was a deer. So we had that happen maybe once a week, or when the vegetables or the garden was going, but when the garden wasn't going, we had to go hunting for them, which wasn't a big chore, except if they were quite a ways away. You had to carry them home. And the buck would probably weigh 125 pounds, and the doe probably 75. Still, they were pretty heavy. But anyways, they were meat, so we didn't starve to death. There wasn't any freezers here at that time, so we had a cooler outside on the porch where the wind would come through. Well, we couldn't eat them all at once, so we canned what we couldn't used so it didn't go to waste. And that's something I didn't like very well was canned venison. Just didn't turn a person on. But we ate it anyways. My grandma had cabins that she rented. They were little houses. They were more than a cabin. And my wife's aunt and her husband rented one for, I don't know how many years, but she had nieces which used to come over in the summer, and we used to go down there swimming, so we weren't really allowed to swim on the beach that they swam on, but we used to sneak over there anyway. So I got to know one of them, Noreen. Well, that was the first summer. The second summer when they came, we got to know each other better. I guess by the third summer, we sort of got going steady. And I was working in the bush at that time, and we were thinking of getting married, and she didn't want to marry somebody that would go into the logging camps. So I quit that, and I went to town and went back to school for auto metal technician. And when we got married, I couldn't get an apprenticeship because I was 25. So I got an improver, getting $1 an hour, and she was making $90 a month. So we had a bit of a struggle, and we paid $45 a month we had a basement suite. It didn't have any toilet in it, so we had to go up to stairs to the people that owned the place to go to the toilet. Same as a sink, we had to use laundry tubs for, doing the dishes or washing or that. For fridge, we didn't have a fridge. We had a cooler, which we had to put ice in twice a week. We were living in Vancouver then, or we lived in Kerrisdale, and we lived in a basement suite. Yeah, and then we bought a house in North Vancouver, up by the Cleveland Dam, and we were there for 6-7 years, I guess. And then we went to South Surrey, White Rock, and we got 5 acres there. We built a house and had a family. We had 3 children, a girl and 2 boys. But we placed here. Dad gave us 1.5 acres, well, on Short Road. But it wasn't Short Road then. That was in 59, I think. We came there for quite a number of years, and then my aunt had this place, wanted to sell this place, so that was in 72. We paid $8,000 for this lot at that time. This is where, I wanted to come here too, but Noreen wanted to come here more so that's just what we done. We rented our house in town for, 4 years, I guess. And then we finally decided, we sold that to our daughter. And she's still there. I've enjoyed my retirement, that's for sure, yeah. Well, when we first came here, we went camping a month in the spring and a month in the fall. In the spring, we went to Vancouver Island. In the fall, we went up in the interior. So that took 2 months of the year, but we enjoyed it. We started out with a tent trailer and then finally got a 5th wheel. We had to get somewhere where there was fish. We had to I spent all day fishing every day pretty well, I guess. Even if I didn't catch anything, I just enjoyed being out there in the boat. Well, since we've come here, there's been, there was a little bit of the driftwood, but not much. There was a couple of buildings. The garage in the front along Razor Point Road, that's the only part that was here. And then they built the rest since we've been here, and there wasn't any winery. I don't know, that's been going for 15-20 years, I guess. And the apple cider, that started 2 years ago. I volunteered at the golf course on the grounds, for 12 years. We put in all the rock walls, all the cart paths, and we built number 9 green, number 6 green, and we made, I don't know if you've seen, we called them dolphins, with the 3 poles with the address on it and wrapped around with rope. We made 100 of those, and that paid for the cart path. Well, the golf course used to be George Grimmer's. 2 storekeepers bought that property where the golf course is from George Grimmer, and they donated it. They donated it to the island. Hope Bay was Percy Corbett, and Part Wash was Jack Bridge. So they got together and bought that property, and so the story goes. I don't know if that's true or not. Most of the island occupation was farming, because there wasn't any other work other than the fish plant and the saltery. The farming and of course, vegetable products and that people sold to the store, but anybody that had any land could grow their own vegetables, so there wasn't too much sale for vegetables, although there was some, especially in the summer when people used to come here in the summer. Lots of people had friends to come. They came and visited, and because there wasn't any campground here at that time, or well, there was a couple of Beauty Rest was one, which is on McKinnon Road, and then in Browning Harbor there was the Maples, which had guests. Oh yeah, at the Driftwood there was nothing there. There was, I guess, where the last building he put up, there was a house there. Now, that's the only guy by the name of Swabby. Yeah, it was it was more of a shack than a house, a one room building. But that's the only building that was there. There wasn't nothing else. The original school was where the government workyard is now. It was just a one room school. And that was, I guess, built in the 1800s, because my dad started to go there for the first year or two he was here, and then they built this other school where the new DU is. Went to Victoria and I bought this 32 Oldsmobile. It was a really plush car, and it had straight 8 cylinders in it. And but it had a weak transmission. You couldn't keep low gear in it. And so I don't know. I got 3 or 4 different transmissions put into it, and it was all the same, always the same. So I just didn't bother. I just took off in second gear. It had enough power that you didn't have to slip the clutch too bad to get it going. But it was a nice car. Well, the year I got that car in the summer, we had fire season, and the loggers were on strike. So it was 4 months that I drove 10,000 miles on the island here. That was before Magic Lake came in, before South Pender was in. So we probably only had 20, 30 miles of road. I went over those quite a lot of times, just because there was nothing else to do. Yeah. Oh, I was really excited. Well, I forget what it was now. It was probably only a couple of $100. But then a couple of $100 was a couple of months, 3 months work. It was a dark color. I mean, I can't remember if it was a green or a black. You know, there's still part of it, at least there was, up in the old property. But that was 20 years ago or more, so I don't know. It's probably all rusted out now anyways. Well, I like Pender Island. Well, I did in the early days anyways, because it was, well, I don't know, younger, I guess, and I like working outdoors. But now it's, to me, there's getting too many people here, especially in the ferry situation. You don't get down there an hour early, you don't get on. So it's not as, I don't know. I don't like it as well as I did when I was younger. when I was here. But anyways, that's the way changes are, and that's the way it is. My wife, for 64 years, is Noreen, and we had 3 children, Janet and Ross and Luke. And Janet now is 58. Ross is 54, and Luke is 50. And we got 7 grandchildren. The oldest one is 27, is Cassie, and Emma is 25, I guess, and Isabel's 23, Jake's 22, Gordon's 19, and Lucas is 8 or 9, and Julianne is 6. So that's our 7 grandchildren. I was going to say that my great-grandpa Brackett is buried in the graveyard here, and my grandpa Brackett and my grandpa Barman, and my grandma Brackett is buried here too. My youngest brother is buried here. Nora and I are going to be buried there too.
The title music for this project is Blue Sunset by Frank Enya. All other music written and performed by Ben McConkey. Thank you very much again to Ptarmigan Arts for helping to support this, and thank you for listening.